Hello again and welcome. Michael Pizzolla here. I'd like to welcome you to this edition of the ValueCapping Rant. This is the 2019 Preakness Stakes edition. The 2019 Preakness Stakes will be held at Pimlico on Saturday, May 18th, 2019. And before we get into the video, there's a very important warning I have to give you. This is a warning to triskaidekaphobics. This video may be triggering. You know, I've done some research, and people who go on social media a lot tell me that they get triggered about things. For those of you who don't know what a triskaidekaphobic is, it's someone who's afraid of the number 13. I don't know if you've ever seen elevators where they don't have a 13th floor. This used to be very common here in Las Vegas, by the way. And also, I saw this picture from O'Hare Airport where they didn't have a gate 13. The gates went from 12 to 14, but no gate 13. And interestingly, these were the stalls. I don't know if they're still like this, but this is a picture of the stalls for the horses at Santa Anita Racetrack. And the stalls go from 12, the one in between 12 and 14 is not 13, it's 12A. Why am I saying this? Well, the 2019 Preakness is the 13th race at Pimlico. There are 13 horses in that race. And as you'll see in a minute, Value Cappers VIP, which is value investment potential, well, you'll see. Before I get into that, let me introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Pizzolla. I am the author of the best-selling handicapping book, Handicapping Magic, co-author of the classic Pace Makes the Race. I am the creator of the original online racing form, now known as Post Time Daily 2.0. You can get it at posttimedaily.com. It's fully featured, fully customizable. I am the creator of the Black Magic family of software, Black Magic 1.0, and its current iteration called Value Capper, Black Magic Handicapper 2.0. I've created a free course for you, a video course called the ValueCapping Revolution Basic Training Course. And if you haven't seen it, I would commend it to you highly. Yeah, there's some stuff at the last video about the software and all of that. But more important, it reveals the principles of value capping, which I believe is so essential in the modern game. The game has changed so radically. And it's because of the availability, of so much good information. I cover the value capping framework, value capping versus handicapping, the value capping 5x5 formula, and only the last one is about the software and the training and all of that. If you're not interested in any of that, that's fine. It's fine. But the principles of value capping are so vital and so important, and that is bet horses you like, that the public shouldn't, preferably running against vulnerable favorites. Wait for your price and let the bet make you. And I go into depth in those principles, and I use it in every video that I do. I'm sorry if you've heard some of my videos before, and I'm constantly hammering this home, but I truly believe that this strategy is so key to being successful in the modern thoroughbred game. So if you're interested, you'd like to get that free training, you get a video right away, and then every couple of days a new one appears in your email box and like that. Just go to ValueCapper.com. All right. Now, before getting into the Preakness, I want to make some very important points. Number one, this is not a touting video. I'm not in the business of touting horses. This is rather to demonstrate the principles of value capping, how I use it, how I apply those principles. Win, lose, or draw, that's my approach. The bet horses you like that the public shouldn't, preferably running against vulnerable favorites. You must wait for your price and let the bet make you. 2, I'm making this video a few days before the Preakness. I don't have late scratches. I don't have weather changes. One scratch, the way the pace scenario is, may take away some of the pressure in the race, for example, may change the entire complexion of the race. But this is what I'm looking at right now with those 13 colts running. The other point is that software, numbers, no matter how good they are merely tools. So it's not like, hey, Pizzolla said that his software's got this horse on top and this horse second, and that's how they should finish. Well, yeah, theoretically, the odds, the value capper odds line puts those on top, but does that mean that's the best value in the race? No, and that's where the skill comes in. So it's an evaluating, handicapping, if you will, the value, and that's where the term value capping comes in. And finally, value investment potentials are price dependent. That means if you don't have your price, there's no bet. All right, with all that being said, here's the way, right out of the box, the value capper software looks at the Preakness stakes from 2019, the 2019 edition. And we see win, win, win on top of the line, followed by improbable. Then Warrior's Charge, Always Mining, War of Will. But that's usually not the first thing that I look at. Oh, who's on top? Who does it like? No. This is, again, not touting. It's not about picking horses. How do you go about evaluating whether you've got a decent bet? Well, the first thing I notice is I've got a relatively smooth line. That means I go from 6 to 1 to 7 to 1 to 8 to 1 to 8 to 1 to 9 to 1. So those colts have a fairly equal chance. Now, there's a gap down to another twist of fate and Owendale, who ran against each other last time out. And then that big, thick red line means that's random. So if there are 13 horses in a race, the random odds of one of them winning is 12 to 1. Why? Well, one wins, the other 12 don't, so it's 12 to 1. So any colt with a line above 12 to 1 will be below random. Okay, so that's why Bodie Express starts below random at 13 to 1. Okay, so that's the first thing. What kind of line I'm dealing with? And this is a relatively clean line for one of these big races, right? There are 13 colts. I've got 5 of them before the first gap. Now, the next thing I look at is what kind of projected pace position scenario. Used to do this all by hand, sometimes on these big races like I did in the Kentucky Derby, and what a mess that turned out to be. Don't want to get into it. But boy, oh boy, between the disqualification and the weather and maximum security running to the back numbers that I thought it might have. That was one of the scenarios. I would do that by hand. That's how I cut my teeth on this until I got a software program that was able to replicate it. And it took years to develop that. So in this year's Preakness, the pace projection scenario is pressured positionally. And when you add the velocity in to actually look at the adjusted fractions and how they match against each other and how much pressure will be applied, it looks as if this year's edition might be highly pressured. What does highly pressured mean? Lots of horses either want the lead, will go for the lead, and it will favor the colts coming from off the pace. Now, bear in mind, a lot of things have to go right for a late running horse, or in this case, colt, to win. That is, the pressure has to develop, and it's got to get a fairly clean trip, and has to time the ride well, etc., etc. That's why you insist on price, because a lot of things have to go right. Now, in assessing that, I also like to look at how the track favors running styles for this particular distance. Now, Pimlico doesn't run many mile and 3/16 races. Most of them are the Preakness. I think there's the Pimlico Special. I think it's run at a mile and 3/16 as well. But here are the last 3 Preaknesses that were run on fast tracks. 2017, cloud computing. 2014, California Chrome. 2013, boy, now we're pressing my memory. Oxbow, I think. But here's the interesting thing. Look, in the beaten lengths at the second call, that's that first red box, 3 lengths back, 1 length back, and right on the lead. But look how tight that energy percentage energy expenditure is 51.53, 51.19, 50.89. In old terminologies, we'd call that a late pressing horse. A horse that not too far off the pace, but expends its energy relatively late. Interestingly, when we look at 3 other Preaknesses that were run on sloppy tracks last year, 2018, when Justify wired the field, wire to wire, but expended still in that range, 51.65. 2016 was Exaggerator. Exaggerator came from way off the pace. He was beaten by 6, 7 lengths at both the first and second call, and charged home, beating Nyquist, if I recall correctly. And then 2015, that's really the only early expenditure we see. That's when American Pharaoh just went out there and wired the field and won, expending in 53.03. So what do I take away from that? Well, it's possible to come off the pace, and you need to expend, the horse, rather, or the colt needs to expend the energy late. The race that's interesting to me in this was the 2016 Preakness, where Exaggerator came off the pace, reversing Nyquist, because they ran together in the 2016 Derby. And what's interesting is that a colt named Cherry Wine that year finished second. Okay, why is that interesting? Well, it's the same pace projection as this year's Preakness. Pressured on the positional side, highly pressured on the positional plus velocity side. ValueCapper, and this was before the release of ValueCapper, but in its early iteration, and also Black Magic 1, set up the race as late. It also pointed out that Nyquist had the wrong running style. And when you looked at the Acupressure, which is the internal way that this pace position projection gets done, well, it had Nyquist going for the lead, which, just off the pace of the second call, attaining the lead at the first call, rather, attaining the lead at the second call. And then there were 4 closers in the race: Exaggerator, which had strong numbers, Fellowship, which didn't run, and Cherry Wine, who didn't have good numbers in the race. In fact, I don't have that. I have that horse way down on the line, but still was able, because of the pressure that developed in that race, to get second. So this kind of analysis is important for exotics. Then when I look at this year's Preakness, I see that same projection, pressured to highly pressured. Okay. When I look at how Acupressure looks at the race, I see 4, 5, maybe 6 colts wanting the lead. Certainly, Warrior's Charge and Market King, those are need to lead horses, meaning that their wins have all come wire to wire, or virtually wire to wire. And I've got 4 closers in the race. Owendale, who I showed you in a previous video when I bet him in that stakes race that he won and paid $26, $27. Win, Laughing Fox, and the 2. This is a classic highly pressured race. Let's look at the top contenders, if you will, or contenders, the colts that are on the top of the ValueCapping line, or the ValueCapper line, and see how they fit to both the positional and the energy requirements in the race. Top of the line is Win. This is a colt I favored in the Derby and really didn't run all that well. He was stuck way on the outside, as he is again on the Preakness day. He's going to be in the extreme outside post. He, broke 17th, and he improved his position with all that stuff that was going on and all of that. He's a positional closer. Look at his wins. Now, he wins his maiden virtually wire to wire, presses in his second race, comes from 4 lengths back in the heft at Laurel, comes from 4th position in the Pasco, then in the Tampa Bay Derby closes from 6th position, closes from 8th position, and then in the Kentucky Derby closed from the 15th position. But his energy expenditure, certainly in the last 3 races, have not only been very consistent, but they're right on the Pimlico 9.5 furlong track profile. So, they've also put blinkers on. I'm told to mention that from some of your comments that you've got to know. Well, I don't know. Maybe that'll put them closer to the pace. I'm not an expert on that. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Improbable's probably, going to be the favorite in the race, right? He ran a decent race in the Kentucky Derby, finishing 5th and then got put up to 4th, I guess. And this is an interesting running style. After winning its first 3 races as a 2-year-old, coming from close to the pace, 3rd, 2nd, the first 2 lifetime races, he expended his energy relatively early. The last 3 races, not counting the Derby, have been run late. So he doesn't come right on that sweet spot of 51 and small change, but he's not that far off. This is a logical favorite. This is one of the reasons I don't think win-win-win will get bet, because, well, he just lost pretty badly, right, to Improbable in the Kentucky Derby. So I wouldn't say, now, one of the principles of value capping, preferably against a flawed favorite. Is this a big flaw? Well, no. Although I must say that his performance as a 3-year-old has not been stellar. Now, he just missed in the Rebel, and then he had 2 races in the Slop. And, didn't do badly. Got 2nd in the Arkansas and 4th or 5th in the Kentucky Derby. But not all that inspiring to me. In other words, I think I wouldn't be surprised if this colt won, but I think it's maybe beatable or may provide an opportunity to bet against. Now, Warrior's Charge I have fairly high up in the line, and I'm not very enthusiastic about this colt. First of all, he just broke his maiden in March in a maiden special, and then won an allowance race. But the way he did it was completely wire-to-wire with clear leads. The energy expenditure is not bad, but sometimes when a horse gets a clear lead like that, those numbers can be exaggerated a little bit, in that a horse gets, you've heard the old-timers say they get brave on the lead, and they just kind of gallop out when there are no horses around them. Not gallop out after the race, but I mean in the last 1/8 of a mile, when you have that big and that clear of a lead, it tends to a horse sometimes running a faster late fraction than he normally would. And in this case, Warrior's Charge ran a very big number last out, which I kind of discount. Okay, so again, going back to one of the points that I made, software is a tool. Okay, it presents these things to you, but you got to think your way through it. So I'm not enthusiastic about Warrior's Charge's chances. Now watch, it goes off, and that's Warrior Charge pulling away. Well, okay, it's a horse race. Lots of things can happen. Always Mining is another colt that likes to win wire to wire. In fact, he's won his last 6 races completely wire to wire. Well, technically in the race at Laurel last out, the Federico Tessio, he was 3rd by 4 lengths at the first call. But if you look in that box, every other call has been on the lead and with a clear lead. And if that pressure scenario comes to be on Preakness Saturday, I don't think any of these colts will be able to get that kind of clear lead. And if a colt like this needs a clear lead to win, and you might say, well, the last race shows that he doesn't, and when he broke his maiden, he didn't have a clear lead. Yes, but it looks like most of the good numbers that this colt has earned has been on a clear lead. Now, interestingly, the energy expenditure is pretty good. In fact, it's a little late, and that's because of the reason when a horse gets clear like that, they run sometimes faster late fractions than they normally would. Now, here's the hero or the villain, depending upon how you look at the Derby, of the Derby. Gaffalione's ride on War of Will and almost clipping heels with maximum security and all of that. Leaving that aside, let's look at numbers. War of Will wins in its past performances, wins when it's on or close to the pace. Look at the races in the box. It likes to be kind of close. It's going to be in the one-post position again for the Preakness. And so, it'll probably run a more pressing style race today. I see this colt as part of the pace. And so, even though its expenditure isn't so bad, he's got some numbers for 51.81 when it won the Risen Star. And it's got, very late when it won its maiden and so forth. So I wouldn't dismiss this out of hand, but I'm not enthusiastic about this, certainly not as a second favorite in the race. There is an interesting colt that's further down on the line, and that's Owendale. Owendale, when it won the Lexington, this is the race I was referring to. If you want to go back and look at that video that I posted before the Lexington, I had that. I had Owendale as a 2-horse bet. I bet another horse in that race as well, but $27.40 I think it paid, and this is interesting. And I'm not much, as you know, those of you who know my work, I'm not much big one on jockeys and all of that, but sometimes there's some glaring things that you can learn. First of all, in its maiden win, it closed from 7 by 5 lengths to win the race with a very late expenditure, 50.32. Good late fraction, ridden by Dela Cruz at Indiana. Then it comes to Churchill Downs and is ridden by Bridgmohan. And if you notice in those 3 races where it was ridden by Bridgmohan, this colt was put right on the lead or very close to the lead. It won one of them. The other 2, not so much. Interestingly, Giroux in the Lexington let this colt relax and be off the pace, and he closed and came on. I think this is the way this colt wants to run. He's one of the Acupressure closers in the race. Again, if the pressure develops, I can see Owendale being part of the exotics. And I think if Giroux rides this colt the way he did in the Lexington, he should be running late. Again, this is taking away that, the fact that jockeys, believe it or not, read the past performances. And they can figure out, too, as well, a lot of these colts like to lead. I'll take my colt back. And if a bunch of them think that could lead one of the colts on the lead, and it could wire the field. Possible scenario. And I'll show you some alternative scenarios a little later in the video. The other closer is Bourbon War. It's got strong late fractions when it ran against maximum security in the Florida Derby. It's the last race that this colt ran. You see its expenditure is very late. It's a positional closer. Again, if the pressure develops, this colt could get a piece of the trifecta, superfecta, that kind of thing. Again, you see it's very dependent on this pressure developing. Now, you have to take a stand and think, what's the most likely? So far, based on the number of colts that want the lead, based on the pressure that might develop, based on the track profile that requires you to be kind of close, although you can be like Exaggerator in 2016, where DeSormo let it relax and come off the pace and beat Nyquist, you can close. So although it's not not every one of the Preaknesses, most of them have been more pressing and on the lead, but it is a possibility that if that big pace duel develops, the closing horses can do very well. Now, I like to play what-if games because, the track profile, you got to be kind of close. Value Capper allows you to set up the race with different biases. So on a neutral bias, it's not really a bias if it's neutral, right? So, but you know what I mean. If you set up the race neutrally, neither favoring the early fractions nor the late fractions, we still have that same mix with improbable and win-win-win. Warrior's Charge, as I said, one of the early horses that I dismiss or I'm not enthusiastic about. And brings Boat Express into the mix, one of the 4 colts from the Derby, the hero of the $514 exacta that I posted in the Florida Derby when he finished second to Maximum Security. And then if you really want to go crazy, let's say, okay, none of that pressure develops. It just goes early. Well, then Boat Express comes up with improbable. Interestingly, Win and Owendale are still above the random line. This is on the early bias. So what to do? Given all the evidence that I have at hand, okay, not to sound like a lawyer, right? But given the evidence, I'm leaning to the late bias based on the track profile, based on how the race projects. And I'm going to give the closers my attention. And obviously, the one I'm going to give the most attention to is the colt that's right on top of the line, the 13 win. Now, I was enthusiastic about this colt in the Derby. I bet this colt in the Derby, finished 10th or 9th maybe after it got put up. I don't remember what his official finish was. I will use Owendale. I'm going to have to use improbable in some of the exotics, of course. But I'm going to be looking at those closers to complete my exotics. So I've based this on the pace, position, projection, and the track profile. And barring a downpour, right, where it goes sloppy and, one of the colts gets out like American Pharaoh and expends his energy in 53%, I'm going to favor this late running scenario. I will take win gladly at around 10-1. I think I'll get that. It was just beaten by improbable. When the public looks at the last running line in the Kentucky Derby, it finished, broke 17th. It finished 10th. It was not all that bad a race. And I'm not being defensive. I mean, I bet it lost. Happens all the time. I lose more bets than I win. It's just that, when I cash on a 10-1 shot or 15 or 20-1 shot, you don't have to hit that many of them. And that's one of the strategies of value capping. It's not about picking winners. It's about finding decent value. So I've got a horse I like, right, because it's on top of my line at 6-1, that the public shouldn't, the contention line, which is the software's use of more conventional numbers and approaches to get an idea of what the public would do with conventional handicapping. The public shouldn't. The contention line is 20-1, and the morning line maker made it 15-1. It's a reverser to improbable. It finished, a few lengths back, 5-6 lengths back from improbable in the Derby. And if that pressure develops, even though this colt is way on the outside in the 13 hole, I told you this number 13 would come up. So I hope none of you triskaidekaphobics are still with us, because you'll really get triggered here in a 13-horse race. On the 13th race at Pimlico, the 13 horses on top. I would gladly take a win bet on win. I'll have an exacta box, 13-4. And when I like to do when two horses run against each other, I'll take an extra exacta with a 13-4 straight. Will I have savers with Warrior's Charge, Always Mining, and War of Will? Yes, but not enthusiastically, maybe to get my bet back in the race. I will, however, have exactas with Owendale and with the other closers in the race, Bourbon War, and maybe even Laughing Fox. But of the other closers, I prefer Owendale in the exotics. I'll probably have a mix playing on a throwing win improbable, and then a couple of other horses in tries and supers. I may have a separate exotic box try and super just with the closers. Because look, you've got to take a stand, right? In every scenario, I still have win-win-win above random. I've got them as my Acupressure closer in a highly pressured race. I've got them on top of the line. Now, maybe one of these where I'm chasing a horse, if you will, like Ganavera in the past Triple Crown races. But so be it. That's what value capping is. After the race, it was like, how could you bet that horse? He finished 10th and Improbable creamed him. Well, yeah, well, that's horse racing. That's why, I hope to get, 12, 15 to 1 on this horse. I'll bet it down to 10 to 1. And if I'm right about the pressure scenario and it does collapse and I get my closers, I'm looking for an exaggerator cherry wine kind of finish in the Preakness. So that's my Preakness analysis. And I'm going to urge you that on big days, good value opportunities often appear in the undercards. Now, I've got, 180 races to look through. I haven't done intensive analysis, so do your own work on these. And you can look at some of the undercards. And here's one from the Preakness card, the Pimlico second race, which goes off at 8:05 a.m. out here in Las Vegas. Horse on top of the line is Whirlin' Curlin. Horse I like that the public shouldn't. Okay? And it's got some other things going for him. Same with Blame the Kids. I'm going to be looking very hard at the board. And if I get, maybe 10 to 1 on Whirlin' Curlin, maybe 15 to 1 on Blame the Kids, I'll be looking at using them in either win bets and or exotics, depending upon the price. But when I talk about undercards, look at the other cards of races, the other tracks, because there's a lot of uneducated money that comes out on these big days. Here's an example. And again, I haven't done much work on this race, but here's one that I've got marked to study some more. The Delaware fourth race, where I've only got 3 horses above random. And one of them, the heavy morning line favorite, 3-2 favorite, has got the wrong running style. It's an early horse running in a highly pressured race. The top horse, which is a 9-5 morning line favorite, the 5, is on a layoff. Could they finish 1-2 because they have decent, strong numbers? Sure. But I'm interested in a horse that's tied for the top of the line, the 3, Gimme Kimmy. 7-2 on my line, 10 to 1 on the morning line, 18 to 1 in contention. Sure. Would I take 7-8 to 1 on that horse? Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, the race before this at Delaware, for those of you who have value cap or are interested, has got some texture to it. But in the interest of not making this a 2-hour video, I'm going to let you look at that yourself. But the point is, don't get so mesmerized by the big race that you forget about these undercard, these very simple calls. So that's my look at the 2019 Preakness. And most importantly, yes, of course, I'm a racing fan. It's always fun to cash a ticket. This is a bet that I feel very comfortable about making. Win, lose, or draw, it's a horse I like that the public shouldn't. I think I've got little flaws on both Improbable and War of Will, slightly flawed favorites. It's got some extras going for it. I will wait for my price. As I said, I'll take 10 to 1. Of course, I'd rather, 12 to 1, 15 to 1, sure, but I'll take 10 to 1 on win. Hook it up with Improbable in an exacta box and straight, and have it also with the other closers in the race. I hope you enjoyed that analysis. I hope you got something out of more than just who do you like, or, Baffert's on a hot streak kind of analysis that you hear. If you want that kind of analysis, lots of videos you can watch. I appreciate you spending this time with me and looking over my shoulder as I apply the principles of value capping to the big races. Good luck at the Preakness. Good luck at the races. Please remember to wait for your prices and get a felt sense from your practice, whatever tool you use. If you apply the principles of value capping, get a sense of when you have a horse that you like that the public shouldn't, and you're getting a price on that, and understand why you're getting the price. And that's why I say when you develop that sense, it'll be almost as if the bet is making you. Thank you so much again, and I will see you soon.